H-2 and H-3 airfield from which so many Scuds, 39 Scuds to be specific, were launched against Israel during the first Gulf War?
Well, there's no question but that is the area where the ballistic missiles were launched last time, and they put at risk neighboring countries as well as Israel. We have a lot of special operators ranging across that generally vacant area, unpopulated area, and we feel pretty good about the fact that we've covered a lot of that ground. I wouldn't want to say that it's absolutely certain that something couldn't be fired from that area, but given the overhead control we have, the air superiority, indeed air dominance in that part of the country, and the number of people on the ground, I think that we can feel much better today than yesterday or the day before with respect to that issue.
Mr. Secretary, I know your time is limited. Before I let you go, very briefly on the north, Turkey, there are conflicting reports whether Turkish forces have indeed moved across the line into northern Iraq or not. Have Turkish forces gone into northern Iraq, and does the United States want them to be there?
I've been hearing reports from the press almost every 4 hours for the past 3 or 4 or 5 days, reporting or alleging or speculating that Turkish forces have moved into northern Iraq in force. I can say two things about that. We have no intelligence evidence that suggests that's true. Second, the Turkish forces tell us repeatedly that it is not true. I believe them. In the event that we find that not to be the case, why, obviously that would be unfortunate.
Are U.S. warplanes flying over Turkish airspace now as they go on bombing runs towards Iraq?
U.S. coalition aircraft are flying over all of Iraq. There's no question about it. They're covering every inch of that country.
And the shock and awe campaign is going to continue for how long?
The ground attack and the air attack is going to continue with precision and care until the Iraqi regime is removed and we have been able to find and dismantle their weapon-producing capabilities.
Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Paul Azzan, let me bring it back to you. Obviously, the Defense Secretary clearly convinced it's only a matter of time before the U.S. and coalition forces get the job done in Iraq. How long? Of course, he refuses to speculate.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that, because I was taking notes fast and furiously as you were interviewing Secretary Rumsfeld, and I counted over a half-dozen references to that very fact, and it makes you wonder, and I'm going to share some of what he told you now, about the secondary audience he may have out there, since this is being broadcast internationally. He used some very clear language. The regime is gone. It's over. It won't be there in a relative period of time. He went on to say, hope it will end soon. On another reference, he said, the outcome is certain. The fourth reference I counted, no way to change the outcome. And then there was a final reference when he talked about the very interesting question you asked him about the ongoing contacts between American officials and maybe defectors with individual Iraqi units. And he made it very clear that he thinks that that is working right now. So I was really struck by the repeated references to the fact that the regime will be gone. You couldn't miss that point from that interview.
Well, you're absolutely right, Paula. There's no doubt the Secretary of Defense not only aware of the domestic U.S. audience, he was addressing the international community, if you will, but specifically the fact that CNN International are seen in Iraq itself, and he was clearly addressing leadership in Iraq, military leadership and political leadership, convincing them you could do this the easy way, if you will, or you could do it the hard way. If you do it the easy way, you might survive. If you do it the hard way, you won't survive. There was a clear effort on his part to convince the Iraqi military to lay down their weapons, to surrender, if you will, and let the U.S. In effect determine the next course of history for the Iraqi people.
I also thought he had an interesting response to your question when you asked if Allied forces or coalition forces were using Turkish airspace. And his answer was that the coalition's forces fly all over Iraq. And I know that was a bit of a sensitivity earlier this morning as he was walking out of one of the other Sunday morning shows appearances, and he made it very clear that obviously they did not want Turkish troops crossing over into Iraq.
There's a clear sense we're getting from our embedded reporters, Gary Stryker, for example, who's aboard the USS Roosevelt in the Eastern Mediterranean. There are two U.S. aircraft carriers in the Eastern Mediterranean, the Truman and the Roosevelt. And he made it clear, based on the briefings he's received there, Paula, that U.S. warplanes are not flying over Turkish airspace as they leave those carriers. They're flying over other airspace to go on their bombing missions towards Iraq. So the whole Turkish issue is obviously a very, very sensitive issue. Great disappointment in the Bush administration that the Turkish government, A, didn't allow 62,000 U.S. ground forces to be staged in Turkey to move into northern Iraq, and B, that it's taken them so long to permit airspace to be used, and C, this concern that the Turkish military might unilaterally go in, a source of concern given the animosity between the Kurds in the northern part of Iraq and the Turks. These are very, very complex issues, and the Secretary clearly wants to stay above that a little bit, at least as much as he can.
Well, if there was another question, I think we learned something new from today. When you asked him about what kind of contact was indeed taking place with individual members of Iraqi units, and he said they communicate in a variety of ways, but it's the first time I've heard, and maybe you've heard this before, but I have not, where he said that this was not taking place at the leadership level, but on a lower level, unit to unit, and he said it had been successful so far with some of those Iraqi soldiers deciding, in his words, to do the right thing and lay down their arms.
There's been incredible contact, Paula, not only since the actual war started, but going back weeks, perhaps months. U.S. Special Operations Forces, sometimes working with Iraqi opposition groups. They've had, for example, phone numbers of Iraqi senior officers, their cell phones, their hard lines, and they've communicated directly, not only on the phone, but also they've had emails. They basically say to them in Arabic, look, the United States is coming. You're going to die unless you give up right now. Is it worth it to die for Saddam Hussein, who himself is going to die himself, if you will? And they've been trying to rattle the Iraqi military leadership with these kinds of contacts, which have only intensified, I'm told, in recent days as the U.S. tries to end this relatively quickly. Now, there's no guarantee any of that is going to work, and you heard the Defense Secretary himself say they fully anticipate, as the U.S. and coalition forces move closer towards Baghdad and Tikrit, Saddam Hussein's hometown, which is very strongly defended by the Special Republican Guard, they anticipate the fighting is going to get a lot more intense than it's been so far.
The other message I heard loud and clear was the message the Secretary Rumsfeld gave you when he said this is not an attack on Iraq, this is an attack on the Iraqi regime, and he went on to talk about the care that is taken in the targeting of weapons, and he called it breathtaking. It's interesting because we were listening to a briefing by the Royal Air Force this morning, and they actually broke down statistically how in Desert Storm just 10% of the weapons used had this level of precision. This time around they're saying some 90%, which I might explain, well, if I don't think you've seen some of these counts in newspapers across the country today, how calmly some Iraqis were actually watching this barrage of fire the first night of shock and awe because they had confidence in the precision level of these weapons.
But having said that, Paula, we can't forget that occasionally, even as precise as these JDAMs, these satellite-guided bombs, the Tomahawk cruise missiles, as precise as they are, occasionally some of them do go off course, they go astray, and they could cause significant civilian casualties. We don't know if that's been the case. There's been no formal bomb damage assessment that we've seen, and certainly we have not had the access in Baghdad itself, let alone other cities, in Iraq to go out and take a look, see how much of damage there's been to civilian neighborhoods, for example. But these weapons, the JDAMs, the Joint Direct Attack Munitions, and the other sophisticated precision-guided bombs, they're very, very accurate. Although they're not perfect, they're still mechanical, and they still can make mistakes.
Before we let you go, Wolf, the other thing that I heard that I don't think I've heard so far yet today was Secretary Rumsfeld saying that they are moving ahead of plans. Did that strike you? Because we've really been trying to assess, once you go beyond them saying the campaign so far, the air and ground campaign is successful, just an actual timeline where he said, indeed, this is moving ahead of plan.
It certainly appears to be the case. They're moving very, very rapidly. Before I did the interview with the Defense Secretary, I was told by a source here in Kuwait, a reliable source, that U.S. forces may be as close as 100 miles. 100 miles outside of Baghdad. There's about a 300-mile distance between Kuwait and Baghdad. So they're moving pretty quickly. They're moving rapidly. They're going to be slowed down, presumably, as they get closer to Baghdad and elsewhere where the fortifications are much more intense. But the cavalry is moving, the infantry, they're moving, the Marines, the British Marines, they're moving rather rapidly. They are meeting pockets of resistance, and those pockets could be quite intense and obviously quite dangerous. We don't know the circumstances that surround the capture, for example, of these American POWs now that have been paraded out in front of Iraqi television with Al Jazeera broadcasting those images. I've seen those images here. I was watching Al Jazeera when they aired live about an hour or so ago, and I have to tell you, they're very haunting, extremely disturbing, not pleasant, and certainly I can understand why the Defense Secretary doesn't want those pictures to be shown on worldwide television.
In fact, in his interview with her, your interview with him, he said U.S. soldiers, he wasn't sure that the U.S. soldiers unaccounted for were actually the individuals on this tape. Wolf, I got a lot more to ask you, but we want to call your attention to the screen in Baghdad. It was just about an hour ago that we covered live about a 3 or 4 minute barrage of anti-aircraft fire. We didn't hear any siren sound. And we did not hear any of explosions. We're going to keep an eye on that. And also share with you one more thing Secretary Rumsfeld just told Wolf that I thought was interesting when Wolf asked him about how do you know you're not going to hit innocent civilians. And he said as he watched that campaign unfold on television, he wasn't referring to which night, though, he said you feel your heart break. Sometimes there is unintended loss of life. Wolf?
There's no doubt that this is the most difficult part, not only for someone like the Defense Secretary, the President of the United States, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Tommy Franks. They know very, very well that some of those bombs are going to kill innocent civilians, men, women, and children. Those aviators, for example, who have to push those buttons and launch those missiles, fire those weapons. They also know that some of those weapons are going to kill innocent civilians. They know some of the targets are relatively close to civilian areas, whether mosques or hospitals or schools or apartment buildings, residential areas. This is one of the dangers, obviously, of going into war. They do this. I've spoken with some of these aviators over the years, for example, some of these commanders. They're not happy about it. They're very disturbed about it, but they do it anyways because their bottom line conclusion is if they don't do it, someone else will do that to them. Paula, I want to go to Gary Tuchman. He's not far away from the Iraqi border at an air base, and he's joining us now. He's one of those embedded journalists who've been so helpful to us in getting information from the front lines. Gary, tell us what's going on right now.
Wolf, I think you're saying my name. The reason I can't hear you saying it right now is we do have the warplanes passing over us right now, taking off on the runway, heading in the direction right now of Iraq. We do come to you from a base where we can't say the exact... What I've learned from standing here while these planes pass overhead is I better stop talking or you'll never hear me. We come to you from a base, we can't say the exact location of the Pentagon rules. We can't tell you this is one of the busiest bases in the theater. 550 sorties in the last 48 hours total at all the air bases in at least 38 different locations throughout the world, 3,500. So that gives you an idea, 1/6 to 1/7 of the total sorties come from this base that we're standing at right now in standing with me right now is the wing commander, the man in charge of this base where we're standing, Colonel Tom Jones. Colonel Jones, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Gary.
First of all, you're in charge of all the aircraft here, the A-10s, the F-16s, the Marine aircraft, the Brits, the Australians are here in addition to that. How are things going so far here?
It's going wonderfully. Everybody's working very well together. It's a very busy airfield, and I won't tell you we haven't had problems, but those that we've had, we've been able to overcome very easily.
Which leads me easily into the next question. What kind of problems have you had that you didn't anticipate?
We've had problems with the massive influx of personnel. The personnel arrived here faster than we could get the base prepared for them. We're catching up, and we've made great strides in that regard. As the combat operations have started, there's to be expected, some confusion, but we worked through that very easily. Weapons are flowing now, fuel is flowing exactly as it should, and operations are good.
Did we expect this to be so busy still at this base more than 48 hours after the shock and awe began?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, it's a little loud here as we were saying. Did you expect it to be still so busy at this point of shock and awe?
Yes, I did. This is a huge base. We're going to continue to fly a lot of sorties throughout the duration of the operation here, so I'm not surprised by the number of sorties we've flown.
Colonel Jones, you've flown on 2 missions yourself over the last 2 days aboard F-16 fighters. Tell me where you went today.
I did. I flew both of them today. I was south of Baghdad on both sorties.
Okay, 1 second. Is that an A-10 or an F-16?
F-18.
That's an F-18, which is a Marine aircraft.
That's correct.
It's impressive. Being the wing commander, you can see at a high altitude what kind of plane it is at nighttime. That's pretty impressive. So you flew, wait, now here comes another aircraft. What's that? You can see we're not kidding you when we say this is a very busy base. What kind of aircraft was that, by the way?
It's another F-18.
They usually fly out in twos. We know that 2s and 3s. They don't fly out by themselves. You flew south of Baghdad. What were you doing?
I did. This morning's sortie was a leaflet drop. It was an I.O. sortie, about 20 to 30 miles south of Baghdad.
What did the leaflet say?
I don't know.
Okay, and what was the second one?
The second sortie was a close air support sortie, and support of the ground operations ongoing.
And what did you drop along the way to support those ground operations?
I dropped bombs.
What kind of armaments?
LGBs, precision-guided bombs.
Do you, as the wing commander here, flying on missions, get scared while you're up there?
No, I don't know that there's a nervousness and anticipation, but I think everybody is trained very well for this mission from all services. So I wouldn't call it fear at all. I'd call it a guarded preparation where we're ready for what goes on up there.
Final question I want to ask you. Our correspondent Walter Rogers is reporting that there have been sightings of Iraqi soldiers taking women and children to be human shields, and this has been seen from the air. Have you seen anything like that from the air?
I have not seen that from the air, no.
I want to thank you very much for joining us, Colonel.
You're welcome, Gary. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for talking with us. We also want to mention to you another aircraft that is here at this particular base. Our helicopters, they're called HH-60s. They're Jollies. That's their nickname, and they're used for search and rescue missions. There were 3 search and rescue missions early this morning, Persian Gulf time. However, authorities at this particular base are not releasing information about why those search and rescue missions took place. We can tell you that at around the same time, there was a British Tornado jet that went missing. British defense officials are telling us that British Tornado jet was shot down by a Patriot missile. This is coming from the British defense officials, and that is a tragedy, of course, because Patriot missiles are used to shoot down Iraqi missiles that come in, but apparently this particular Patriot missile accidentally shot down the British Tornado jet. There are 2 pilots who are missing. Wolf, back to you.
Gary Tuchman, he's at an air base not far from Iraq here in the Persian Gulf. Thanks very much for that report. Walter Rogers is standing by. He's one of our other embedded journalists. He's now in Iraq with the 7th Cavalry, a U.S. Army division. Walter, what are you seeing? What are you hearing?
What we're seeing with the 7th Cavalry is fires along the horizon In the distance, the 7th Cavalry has pulled back somewhat from our original line. The reason being that earlier this afternoon we took a very tight pattern of artillery from the Iraqi units ahead of us. That was a brigade-sized unit at one point, and some of the units pulled back. The rest of us went forward. Now we've pulled back. After that incoming artillery barrage, the Air Force came in and dropped bombs. They made run after run on the suspected Iraqi artillery positions. We could see the sky illuminating with these big fireballs about dusk, and but it's questionable how effective these A-10s were. The Iraqis were firing shoulder-fired missiles at them, heat-seeking missiles, and the A-10s could not come down as low as they would like to in an optimum bombing run, and they had to stay high and release flares behind themselves to deflect any heat-seeking missiles. So a bit of a stalemate here at this point. The 7th probably should have been further up the road tonight, but it appears to the commanders here that the Iraqis are trying to draw them into a trap. So at this point, the 7th is standing off. Wolf?
Walter, you reported a little while ago, earlier today, about these human shields. There's evidence the Iraqis are placing so-called human shields at various sensitive sites. What can you tell our viewers about that now?
Senior U.S. military officials, senior officers with the 7th Cavalry had called in a bombing run on an area where the Iraqis had entrenched themselves not too far out in front of us, perhaps less than a mile. At the last minute, they canceled that bombing run because their forward observers, that is the Army's forward observers, saw the Iraqis hurting women and children. According to the senior Army official here, senior officer, said they saw the Iraqis herding and women and children into the military emplacements that the Iraqis had been holding for some time. Now, we're given to believe this is not the Iraqi army. The regular soldiers out in front of us were told they would like to surrender, or that's the word getting back to the senior officials with the 7th Cavalry. The problem is that there are Fedayeen units who've taken over the command. Fedayeen are the elite of Saddam's soldiers, higher than even the Republican Guard, and they apparently are running the defense of this particular city in south-central Iraq. They are the ones who have given the orders to take human shields, and they are the ones who have been ordering artillery out on these U.S. positions to the south. Wolf?
I assume, Walter, that seeing those human shields, those innocent Iraqi men, women, and children being brought to that location gave the 7th Cavalry commanders some pause, and they decided not to launch munitions against those targets.
That's true, Wolf. What happened, of course, was they had a close air cover support called in. That is, Air Force planes were about to make a bombing run upon the Iraqi positions when the forward observers said, no, scrub this mission, don't bring those bombs in, because we can see them herding women and children into the lines where the Iraqi soldiers are. So that mission was scrubbed. Then later in the afternoon, to try to decapitate the Iraqi command in the town ahead of us, they called in yet another airstrike, and that particular airstrike was led by a Kiowa helicopter. It fired a Hellfire missile at the Ba'ath Party headquarters, which is also the intelligence headquarters in the area out in front of us. We could see this big illumination. The Hellfire roared in. It hit a 4-story building. Again, the Ba'ath Party, the Iraqi Ba'ath Party headquarters, which, as I say, doubles as an intelligence headquarters here. And then when the Air Force jets saw where the Hellfire missiles slammed in, they roared in and put in at least one precision-guided bomb. We can't tell you the state of the damage to that building, but there was a heck of an illumination in the sky. Wolf?
Walter Rogers, he's with the 7th Cavalry in south-central Iraq. We can't be more precise than that, doing some excellent reporting for us. Walter, thank you very much. This important note for our viewers around the world: in about 90 minutes or so from now, a little bit more than 90 minutes from now, 2 p.m. on the east coast of the United States, there will be a briefing at the Central Command, General Tommy Frank's headquarters outside of Doha in Qatar. The Central Command will have a daily briefing on what's going on in the war. CNN, of course, will have live coverage, as will CNN International. Paula?
Lots of news, Wolf, coming out of your interview with Secretary Rumsfeld that you started about 45 minutes ago. He confirmed the fact that American soldiers are now being held as prisoners of war in Iraq. The Arab satellite station Al Jazeera has been running footage from Iraqi TV, apparently with some interviews with the captured Americans, including a female soldier. Now, when Wolf asked the secretary about this tape, he said it is against, or it is a violation of the Geneva Convention, not only to take pictures of the prisoners, but to humiliate them. And he said it would be unfortunate if television networks aired them. Let's check in with Barbara Starr, who has the very latest on the Crim process of letting these soldiers' families know that some of their own have either been captured or in some cases killed. Barbara.
Paula, let's walk through what we do know from here at the Pentagon. Apparently, earlier today, an Army maintenance unit was moving through south-central Iraq. Somehow, they strayed from their position and encountered Iraqi military forces. A firefight ensued. We can tell you that some U.S. soldiers were killed, some indeed captured, now being held by the Iraqis. Now, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld has expressed some concern, as you said, about this tape, this Iraqi tape, which is being broadcast by the Arab channel Al Jazeera. Here's some of what the Secretary had to say about it.
Been prisoners taken in every war since the beginning of mankind. We treat our prisoners well. We have over 2,000 Iraqi prisoners of war at the present time. They're in POW camps that have been brought along. They're being fed. They're being provided medicine where it's appropriate and needed.
Now, Paula, let's talk a little bit about what is on that tape, which has been seen here at the Pentagon, but which Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld has expressed so much concern about. It shows 4 American soldiers, the Iraqis interrogating them. The first soldier appears to be confused, unable to respond to the questions. The second soldier is asked his name. He responds that his name is Edgar. He is asked his hometown. He says it is Texas. There is a third soldier. He is wearing a helmet. He gives his name in full. We will only tell you his first name. It is James. He is asked his hometown. He says it's New Jersey. And then there is a woman. She is asked. She says her name is Shauna. She says her hometown is Texas. The camera pans down to her feet. They appear to be wounded. There are some bandages down there. Now, officials here say, based on the identifications they believe they are able to make of these 4 soldiers, they are now beginning urgently to try and notify their families. Paula?
Tell us a little bit more of the reaction that you heard when the knowledge of this tape and the taking of these prisoners of war became public.
The Pentagon is very sensitive to this issue. The question of POWs, of course, first and foremost, a humanitarian issue for the families who may be seeing this on television. Very much immediate concern about American television networks broadcasting the identities of any of these people before the military can get to them through family assistance programs and notify the families about what they do know about the status of their loved ones. There are also soldiers that were killed in this encounter perhaps, and they want to try and figure out who these people are, also notify their families. So first and foremost, a humanitarian issue at this time. That is what they are dealing with here at the moment. Whether or not it develops into a political issue for the Bush administration remains to be seen in the hours ahead. Paula?
Barbara Starr, thanks so much. Back to Wolf now. Wolf, I thought it was really interesting when you were talking to Secretary Rumsfeld about what we watched unfold on live television this morning when we saw Iraqi troops shooting into the Tigris River when they claimed to be looking for downed American pilots. Secretary Rumsfeld told you basically that he didn't know anything about that river, and yet in an earlier morning appearance, he said it had been suggested to him by some that perhaps this whole thing was staged. So I don't know what kind of information you're getting from that, but that's a shot that we spent a lot of time trying to analyze this morning. Of course, as you have mentioned, American and British officials said that every one of their planes is accounted for.
I've heard that now repeatedly over the past couple hours, Paula, not only directly from the Defense Secretary in the interview, but earlier from other military commanders here on the scene. They say all U.S. and coalition aircraft are accounted for. There was that tragic incident, the RAF Tornado, that apparently was shot down by a Patriot air defense missile in northern Kuwait. There have been these helicopter crashes that we've reported on over the past 48 hours. But as far as all U.S. and British warplanes returning safely to their bases, the Defense Secretary and other senior military officers insist that has been the case. We have another embedded journalist, CNN's Alessio Vinci. He's up with U.S. troops not far away from Nasiriyah. Alessio, tell us what's happening in the effort to secure that key town on the road to Baghdad.
Well, Wolf, I can tell you, first of all, following up on the report that Barbara Starr just delivered from the Pentagon. Well, this morning, when we arrived on the southern bridges of Al-Nazariya, we did indeed see the aftermath of that ambush involving a military convoy bringing up supplies up to the fighting forces in the northern part of the country. And indeed, the aftermath of that attack appeared to be one of a violent battle between those U.S. military forces inside the convoy and the Iraqi forces attacking them. We saw the truck with bullet holes in all the windows. Most of the tires were flattened by bullets, and we saw again the aftermath of a very intense battle. As our convoy progressed into Nazariya, we at first encountered small arm fire resistance, which the U.S. military forces that I am embedded with answered back using heavy machine guns and grenades. But then one of the units came under a direct attack by Iraqi forces, and at least one amphibious vehicle, some sort of armored personnel carrier that the Marines are using here to transport their infantry groups. Well, that Amtrak, as they call it here, came under direct fire and took a direct hit by a rocket-propelled grenade, setting it on fire and unfortunately killing all the people who were on board. I am still unable to confirm the exact number of casualties. Commanders here are even trying to still go through the list of their own Marines here to make sure that everybody is accounted for, and those who are missing, still trying to figure out who is missing and their names and stuff like that. This happened several hours ago, but it is now dark here, and the various units are trying to regroup. Eyewitnesses, however, reports from journalists who were at the time of the attack at the scene embedded with a specific unit are telling me that at least 10 Marines have been killed, could have been killed in that attack. Wolf?
Alessio, is it your understanding that those U.S. soldiers who were seen on Al Jazeera on Iraqi television, and Al Jazeera rebroadcast that Iraqi television video, that they were taken captive in a battle near Nasiriyah, where you are?
It is my understanding, Wolf, because what happened earlier this morning, before this latest firefight took place, when the Marines were killed in their Amtrak, we came across the aftermath of an ambush of a supply convoy. It was clearly that it was a supply convoy because we did not see any military type of vehicle in terms of no tanks or no APCs. These were log trains, trucks. They're carrying heavy boxes, fuel, water, all the sort of logistical support for the U.S. forces fighting with the U.S. infantry up in the north. And we were asked, as a matter of fact, by our commander here to withhold information that there were some U.S. military personnel held captive early this morning until the Pentagon could confirm the information. Now, as you can imagine, communication out here on the ground is very difficult, and I've just heard Barbara Starr reporting indeed the Pentagon confirmation that attack has taken place. So it is quite easy for me to put the two together, because indeed that appears to be the attack that Barbara is referring to, and as a matter of fact, it appears that those captive soldiers or members of the U.S. military could have been taken captive just on the southern bridge of Al Nazariya.
And very briefly, before I let you go, Alessio, what's the status of Nasiriyah right now? It seems a little bit confusing whether the U.S. and coalition forces have control, have entered the city, have not. What's the status?
Well, Wolf, I cannot go into the specifics about the military operation at this time in Al Nazariya. I can tell you it is still ongoing, but at this time I cannot go into the details about what the plans of the U.S. military are for the next 24 to 36 hours, nor I can tell you whether there are still U.S. forces in Nazariya at this time. These are all part of operational security, and we do have very strict rules here under which we have to abide for, and therefore I cannot give you that information right now.
All right, that's fair enough. Alessio Vinci, our correspondent, one of our embedded journalists with the U.S. forces moving into south central Iraq. Alessio, thanks very much. Please be careful. We'll be checking back with you very often. Paula, as you know, and as our viewers I think now know, there are certain ground rules these embedded journalists have to adhere to. There are some 500 of them from international news organizations, not just U.S. news organizations. They're bringing us frontline reports, very amazing reporting going on. They're only getting what they can actually see, but there are also serious restrictions on what they can report, and we have to honor those guidelines. Paula?
Thanks so much, Wolf. And I don't know whether I heard this clearly, but I think I did when Alessio Vinci reported to you that it is his belief that potentially some of those American troops that have gone missing came possibly from a bridge not far from Nasiriyah. So I want to quickly bring you up to date on the fact that the president was informed of this earlier today, although he has remained out of sight at Camp David. He had two briefings, one with cabinet members, we are told, one with the CIA, and he was made aware of this fact. Let's go to CNN Center where Renee San Miguel is standing by to give us some better insights as to what stage this rolling campaign may hit next. Renee?
Thank you, Paula. One of our CNN military analysts, retired Army General David Grange, has some unique experience with the POW situation. General, you were in charge of a division where 3 soldiers were taken captive during the Kosovo campaign in the spring of 1999. Talk a little bit about that. What was that situation?
3 of our soldiers were taken prisoner in Macedonia during the Kosovo campaign and taken into Serbia and were held for a while until eventually they were released.
And so tell me, what kind of contact did you have with the Serbian army, reminding them about the Geneva Convention rules that have been mentioned by Secretary Rumsfeld?
No direct contact. I believe the government had contact, and of course you go through the International Red Cross, and they're a third-party representative in a situation like this. And then later on, I think through the negotiations with members of the United States, then the 3 soldiers were released.
Well, we have a graphic here. Secretary Rumsfeld was talking about the Geneva Convention, his objection to Al Jazeera showing the pictures of this, or to the Iraqi official showing this. General protection of prisoners of war, Article 13 of the Convention. Prisoners of war must at all times be protected, particularly against acts of violence or intimidation and against insults and public curiosity. Do you believe that Secretary Rumsfeld's objections fit in with this particular article?
Absolutely. If you look at the difference between, over 2,000 prisoners of war, Iraqis taken by coalition forces, once they're captured, searched to make sure they don't have weapons, they're moved immediately to a rear area in a protective status where they're sheltered, fed, and given medical aid. They're not put in a situation where microphones are shoved in their face, flaunted on worldwide television. Totally different approaches to how you're supposed to take care of prisoners of war, and this was, I think, a violation like the Secretary said.
We have a map of southern Iraq, which is the area where supposedly these captures took place, but while we're showing that, I want to ask you, what is the training like for soldiers in the event they are taken prisoner?
The training for soldiers, in case they are taken prisoner, is there's different levels. And some soldiers get more extensive training than others, and I probably should just leave it at that.
Okay, but you know, the soldiers are prepared for this event. I have to ask you, though, about the morale once word of this gets out. You combine this, the POW situation, with what happened at Camp Pennsylvania, also with one American soldier accused of turning on his own unit and possibly killing one of his own. What does that do? What could that do to the morale of the soldiers?
I think the morale issue when it has to do with prisoners of war, I think right now, and I just go back to how I felt and my chain of command felt, is that this will actually strengthen the resolve of the coalition forces to complete their mission even with more dedication than it has been in the last 3-4 days.
How our Pentagon reporter Barbara Starr reported that apparently these troops were away from, somehow managed to stray into an area where, as it was said, they should not have been. How could that happen in this particular situation, do you think?
Very confusing battlefield. You have combat troops, you have support troops, you have troops in between. They're moving back and forth with fuel, with ammunition, with repair parts, moving prisoners, taking care of displaced people, civilians on the battlefield. It may be nighttime. It gets very confusing. It's hard to navigate in a lot of this terrain.
Where do you think the pace of the war goes from here now that we have this situation with prisoners of war on both sides of the conflict?
Two things, I believe. One is that the pace, I think, may pick up a bit. And I say that because extraordinary measures have been taken to regulate the amount of damage, hoping that the majority of the Iraqi forces will surrender or just turn down and put down their arms and move back to their garrisons or their home. And I think it's very important now that if it doesn't work, you'll see an increase in pressure to do so.
We have heard reports about the human shields, about Alessio Vinci and Walter Rogers, actually. He's one of the embedded journalists with the 7th Cavalry. Apparently, there are human shields being involved here. Let's talk about the Fedayeen Saddam, the men of sacrifice here. We have a graphic showing exactly what that's about. Keeping the irregular Iraqi army, from what we understand, from surrendering, which is what apparently they want to do, and also gathering women and children near them.
Yeah, it just goes to show the different types of forces here. I think there's some Iraqi military organizations in the Iraqi army that want to fight as soldiers. And then I think you have the extreme, the thugs that, violate the rule of land warfare and force others to do certain things. And it really is, it goes back also to the treatment of prisoners. It disturbed me that in this situation, that these prisoners were shown on television. However, what the positive aspect of this is that the world has seen American prisoners in a certain condition on worldwide television, and expects that they would be treated according to the Geneva Convention and returned in that same condition, or better, than we saw on television already today.
General David Grange, our military analyst, thank you for your insight. We do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Paula, back to you.
And we have more on that story, Renee, from the Pentagon. Earlier today, the Pentagon said that fewer than 10 of its troops were missing. Shortly after that, CNN received the first pictures of American soldiers killed and captured in action in Iraq. The pictures were transmitted by Al Jazeera, the Arab language satellite network. The video was shot by state-run Iraq TV. We want to let the audience know that the pictures and interviews are disturbing. CNN has made a decision not to show the video of those killed and will instead use this single image with no identifiable features. In other images, it was apparent some soldiers had been shot, some of them in their forehead. We do not know their identities. 5 other soldiers were also interviewed, and each gave their name and hometown in the United States. The Pentagon tells CNN that it is notifying the families of those captured and those who were killed. U.S. Central Command, or CENTCOM, in Qatar, that is, has announced a briefing at 2 p.m. Eastern today. We will carry that alive. Again, that's coming up at 2 p.m. Eastern, 10 p.m. in Qatar and Baghdad, their time. Still to come on the special edition of Late Edition, War in Iraq. A growing number of families are fleeing their homes in northern Iraq. We will go live to the area where they are taking refuge. Plus, more Americans take to the streets today to make their voices heard about the war in Iraq. We're live from New York City, and we've got continuous live pictures in Baghdad. When we come to that picture, you will see there it appears to be quiet. At about 11:10 Eastern time, we saw a 3 or 4 minute barrage of anti-aircraft fire. No sirens went off, no signs of explosions. It has been quiet since then. We're back in 60 seconds.
The war in Iraq continues, and no one takes you closer than CNN, live throughout the day. Stay with CNN, the most trusted name in news.
When company comes over this time of year, one of the things we like to talk about is our favorite fishing spot. Mine's right here at Shoney's, next to the fryer.
Now at Shoney's, we're serving company a country-style fish fry with our delicious golden fried buttermilk shrimp dinner for $7.99 and our crispy fish dinner for $5.99.
Hey, anybody seen my bobber? Shoney's. Man, we can't wait to have you over.
I'm Eddie. I play football.
I'm Eddie. I build houses.
I won the Heisman Trophy.
We won the National Builder of the Year award twice.
I rushed for 1,000 yards 6 times.
We sold more homes in Nashville than anybody, ever.
I played in the Super Bowl.
I've got hair.
Looking for a new home in Nashville? PhillipsBuilders.net. And don't forget, our Eddie's got hair.
So we have a cellist and 2 violinists.
I don't say this just because I was a school teacher. It would be devastating for our young people if music was taken out of the classroom because it's something they can latch onto and find their identity in. When a kid learns how to take that and make it his own, it's amazing. It's really fun to see a child light up like that and to know that they're getting it.
Music lets kids shine. Help us keep it in our schools. Join Blue from American Express. Support Save the Music. Log on to find out how.
I've got to get a new car.
I've got to get to my Lincoln Mercury dealer.
Think big at your Lincoln Mercury dealer's Think Big sales event, where you can get big incentives on every Lincoln and Mercury, including Mountaineer, the new Lincoln Aviator, and Navigator, with its available power folding third-row seats and available navigation system. Save big with special limited time incentives on every Lincoln and Mercury. Think big now through March 31st. See your local Lincoln Mercury dealer today.
Well, Paula, this is the first Sunday since the war began, and pastors all over this area, all around Fort Campbell, are offering special messages to the families of the 101st. And by all accounts, that looks like they need it today. Everyone I've talked to says they're dealing with all sorts of emotions today after the shock of what happened last night, particularly the emotion of betrayal.
I think that's what a lot of people are feeling right now, is that sense of betrayal and just a total sense of shock. You just don't expect someone who is supposed to be your battle buddy or your comrade and just to do something like that. You don't expect it ever.
I just believe that the Lord God is around and about him and protects him from all harm, that no bad can come to him.
And very little information actually coming out of Fort Campbell today. Public information officers say they will hold a news briefing at 2 p.m. Eastern time today. At that time, they expect to tell us the name of the suspect that is in custody and more details about him. We hope to also learn more about the information as well as how the 101st is responding to last night's incident. But for now, this hour, it is a time of prayer for so many people around Fort Campbell. Here at the First Assembly of God, people are coming in. So many military families here, very patriotic. The soldiers, the families affected in last night's incident, very prominent in everyone's prayers.
And Lord, we ask you for all of our troops, Lord, would you just guard them this morning, protect them. Lord, we don't know exactly where they're at. We don't know the battles that they might be involved in this morning. And Lord, we ask you to guard them, God. Lord, we ask you to encamp your angels of protection around them. Lord, would you just help them, God.
God Bless America and the Pledge of Allegiance, a very prominent part of the congregation's sermon here today. Today, after all that's happened, there is no separation of church and state here at Fort Campbell. Paula?
David, I know how seriously these families take their sense of patriotism and the commitment of their family members to the service. But obviously, these families are under tremendous strain. You've had a chance to talk with a number of them. What else did they have to say?
Well, part of the claim to fame for the 101st is they are in a constant state of readiness. So they are constantly ready to go to war. Their spouses are constantly in the back of their mind preparing for all the bad things that might happen to their husbands. Something like this act of betrayal, as they're calling it, is something they just cannot prepare for, and that's especially hard for them to deal with right now.
David Mattingly, thanks so much. George Heath, who is a civilian spokesman for Fort Campbell, Kentucky, had this to say in one of the newspapers today. Death is a tragic incident regardless of how it comes, but when it comes from a fellow comrade, it does even more to hurt morale. Back to Wolf now in Kuwait City. Wolf?
Thanks very much, Paul. I want to go right back to Nasiriyah, that key town in south-central Iraq where U.S. forces are approaching. We have another embedded journalist who's on the phone with us now, Sharon Schmickel, who's a reporter for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Sharon, tell our viewers what you're seeing, what you're doing. What can you tell us?
I can tell you that I'm with a shock trauma platoon that has taken in some casualties today from La Nasiriyah. 2 Marines were brought to the Kent Hospital here, and they told us that they were riding in La Nasiriyah in a light armored vehicle when they were hit by a rocket-propelled grenade. They said that one of the Marines in the vehicle died, and that 2 were severely burned and were taken to a British burn unit. The 2 who we saw had shrapnel wounds and facial burns. One was burned, had his eyebrows, eyelashes burned off, and face blistered. The hospital here tells me now that they're expecting more patients to arrive from a different shock trauma platoon in the region that's been overwhelmed with serious casualties. They also are expecting at least 1 Iraqi prisoner of war to come here for treatment tonight. It is nighttime here.
Sharon, are the casualties you're talking about U.S. casualties, coalition casualties, and Iraqi casualties, or are they all together?
The first group that I was talking about are U.S. Marines who were riding in a light armored vehicle. There is at least 1 Iraqi prisoner of war who is expected here for treatment tonight, and the other casualties that are at the neighboring shock trauma platoon I have not seen yet, but I believe that they are U.S.
Sharon, do you know the circumstances surrounding the injuries, the casualties to the U.S. Marines? What the nature of the firefight, if you will, was?
The Marines who came into the hospital today told me that they had been riding in their vehicle, that they were suddenly surprised by their vehicle had broken down somehow, and they were waiting for a tow vehicle to arrive. They were suddenly surprised by this hit from a rocket-propelled grenade. They said there were Iraqi citizens, civilians in the vicinity who did not seem to be engaged in this battle. When they got out of their vehicle, they said that someone opened small arms fire on them, and other Marines in the area returned fire with heavy machine guns.
One more question, Sharon, before I let you go. What can you tell us about the atmosphere, the sense of the danger, if you will, that's unfolding in Nasiriyah right now?
I think that it was a bit of a surprise to the people who are here, because when we came through the border into Iraq about 30 hours ago, there was little resistance along the way, and it was fairly peaceful. We weren't hearing gunfire here. We weren't hearing any signs of war, really. And it was only about midday today that we began to pick up reports that there was this intense fight going on in La Nazaria.
Sharon Schmickel with the Minneapolis Star Tribune, one of the embedded journalists covering this war. Be careful over there. Thanks very much for joining us. We have reporters covering all aspects of this war, including, of course, in northern Iraq. That's where we find CNN's Ben Wiedemann. He's joining us now live. Ben, you're not that far away from key areas in the north, Mosul in particular, Kirkuk. Tell us what's happening up in the north.
Yes, Wolf, we're about 28 miles to the east of Mosul, and it's been another evening of bombing in that northern city. About an hour ago, we were watching some fairly intense anti-aircraft coming up from the city, from the north of the city as well. And apparently, according to Al Jazeera, there's more bombing underway, sirens going off just a little while ago. Now, some interesting developments here on the front line, which is basically a kilometer and a half behind me. The front line between Kurdish and Iraqi forces is, throughout the day, we've been seeing them digging mines, deepening their trenches, also working on calibrating their mortars, their heavy machine guns, their anti-aircraft guns as well. One other development, apparently, the United States has finally received the approval from the Turks for overflights into northern Iraq, and apparently U.S. forces have already begun to arrive in this area. Wolf?
And the basic nature, more pummeling going on, more airstrikes. Can you hear those as you have over these past several nights?
Yes, we did hear it. Very loud thumps from the distance. Unfortunately, when you're 28 miles away from the targets, it's very hard to tell exactly what's going on. All basically you can see are these flashes on the horizon, and just seconds later you hear the thumps of the impact. But it looks like another night, however, of pounding of that northern city. Wolf?
All right, Ben Wiedemann up in the north. Ben has been doing an outstanding job for us. Thanks, Ben, very much. We now have a guest here in Kuwait City, Tamara Al-Rifai, with the International Committee of the Red Cross. Tamara, thanks so much for joining us. We're concerned. We're talking about POWs, which, of course, is a major issue of concern for the International Committee of the Red Cross. What can you tell us about what you've seen about these U.S. POWs who've now been paraded out on Iraqi television, Al Jazeera rebroadcasting that videotape?
What we have seen is obviously what everybody else has seen. Now, us being an organization that works in situations of conflict and that is concerned about the fate of the victims, all of them, so be it wounded people, prisoners of war, or civilians, yes, we are as concerned as everybody else is, particularly that the laws are clear under international humanitarian law, the law of armed conflict, or the Geneva Conventions, and particularly the Third Geneva Convention related to the treatment of the prisoners of war.
Now, I just interviewed the Defense Secretary of the United States, Donald Rumsfeld, who said that what Iraqi TV did was a violation of the Geneva Conventions, parading POWs before television cameras. Is that your understanding of the Geneva Conventions?
Well, our understanding of the Geneva Conventions is about reading the articles of the Geneva Convention, and obviously Article 13 refers specifically to such a situation because it says that POWs must at all times be protected, particularly against acts of violence or intimidation and against insults and public curiosity. And any activity, any act that contradicts any article of the Geneva Convention is a violation.
What you saw on Al Jazeera, the videotape of Iraqi television, was that a violation, in your opinion, of the Geneva Conventions governing prisoners of war?
What we saw on Al Jazeera is actually something we often referred back to journalists about. It is up to the journalists to have the ethics or not to show what happened. Now, if we go back to the article I just told you about, then anything against this article is a violation.
Because the article, and I'll read it specifically, it says you cannot have outrages against personal dignity, in particular humiliating and degrading treatment. Was what we saw on Iraqi television, these American prisoners of war, these soldiers, including one female, was that, in your opinion, degrading treatment of these POWs?
Well, our concern is the concern of the ICRC, and this article in particular, when it comes to publicly displaying prisoners of war, is a concern for their safety and the safety of their families. I mean, we do know that showing publicly prisoners could be detrimental to the safety of their family.
Are you in touch with the Iraqi government now in connection with these American POWs?
We are in constant contact with both parties, actually, in the fact that the ICRC has sent out a memorandum at the outbreak of the hostilities reminding all the parties to the conflict of their obligations under the Geneva Conventions. All of them are signatory of the Geneva Conventions. Now, in this aspect, these are POWs. This is a category of victims that falls under the mandate of the ICRC. So the answer is we are going to activate our mandate. We are going to get in touch with the authorities concerned. Yes.
The Reuters news agency is reporting, even as we speak right now, that there is a statement coming out of the Iraqi government. They will treat these American soldiers, these prisoners of war, according to the Geneva Conventions, which, if that's going to happen, that would obviously be encouraging to the ICRC.
Well, this is exactly what the ICRC hopes for anyway. But this, again, is what we hope for from all parties detaining people who are taken as part of the conflict. Yes, this is exactly what we hope for.
As you know, the Iraqi government, when it comes to prisoners of war, doesn't necessarily have the best track record, and I'm specifically referring to the 500 or 600 Kuwaiti prisoners who are still missing in Iraq. The Kuwaiti government, we're in Kuwait right now, still says the Iraqis are refusing to notify them, refusing to tell them whether they have them, refusing to provide any information. I assume the International Committee of the Red Cross has been in touch with the Iraqi government involving the Kuwaiti POWs from the first Gulf War.
Absolutely, but again, let's not mix all the cases. This is a totally different case. This is a case that the ICRC will work on specifically. And as you just mentioned, we did have a kind of a commitment to treat those people as per the Geneva Conventions. So I don't think we should mix everything together.
All right, Tamara, thank you very much. Good luck to you and the Red Cross, the International Committee of the Red Cross. Good luck to all your fellow workers. You're doing important work. Paula, back to you.
Thanks so much, Wolf. We want to talk with Lieutenant Colonel Dale Storr, who was shot down over Kuwait during Desert Storm, was taken to Baghdad, where he was held prisoner for 33 days. He is now flying with the Washington State National Guard. He joins us from Spokane, Washington. Thank you very much for joining us. First of all, when you heard the news, the government had confirmed that Americans had been taken prisoners of war. What went through your mind?
Oh, put me right back into prison again. It's a terrible thing. I feel so sorry for those guys. My heart goes out to them and their families. I hope Baghdad treats them a lot better than they treated us.
You heard the Wolf Blitzer just read some kind of bulletin saying the Iraqis now say they will not violate the Geneva Convention here, but that wasn't the case when you were held prisoner, was it?
No. They never did for us during Desert Storm. They never admitted to or even tried to obey the Geneva Conventions. They had gross violations when they treated us. But, they better treat those guys according to the Geneva Conventions. I will hold them 100% responsible for any mistreatment that they might receive.
Do you have any reason to believe they really would honor the Geneva Conventions this time?
Personally, no. I don't believe in that. They treated us so horribly, but I expect them to. And I will demand them to, and like I said, I'll hold them 100% responsible for any mistreatment that they might receive.
Dale, if you wouldn't mind standing by, we'd love to get back to you in a couple of minutes. I need to go straight to CNN Center where Leon Harris is standing by, and we'll rejoin this conversation. Leon, what's going on?
Well, hello, Paula. This is Leon Harris at CNN Center. We're going to get back to Paula and Wolf Blitzer in just a minute. But first, here is what's happening this hour. The Pentagon says fewer than 10 U.S. soldiers have been captured or killed in Iraq. Officials have begun notifying their families. Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld says Iraqi TV footage of what it says are the captured soldiers violates the Geneva Conventions. Iraqi forces scoured the Tigris River in Baghdad today, purportedly looking for pilots from a coalition plane. However, neither the U.S. nor Britain says that any planes are missing in that area. U.S. Marines are attacked as they push toward Baghdad. A rocket-propelled grenade hit a troop carrier in the southern city al-Nasiriyah. It's not known how many Americans were hurt or if any were killed in that incident. Al-Nasiriyah is a key crossing point over the Euphrates River. The 307th Cavalry Unit came under fire earlier today in south-central Iraq. One soldier was hurt. U.S. warplanes swooped in and then bombed the Iraqi sites in response, quelling that action. Defense Secretary Don Rumsfeld says a couple thousand Iraqis are in U.S. custody right now. It's not known whether they were captured in battle or if they were just among those who surrendered to the United States. President Bush is keeping abreast of the developments at Camp David. This morning he met with Dick Cheney, Condoleezza Rice, and his other advisors, and he's expected to return to